Good afternoon. How is everyone? You guys are still here, which means you are the hardy few. You are here for the right reasons. You're not going out to grab donuts or Danish or anything. You really want the real stuff, so I salute you. It is a pleasure to be with you today. My name is Tomicah Tillemann. I'm the founder and director of the Blockchain Trust Accelerator at New America. Let me begin with a big thank you to our hosts, both the BSIC Coalition and Microsoft and York, for welcoming us all here today. I was asked by Vanessa to speak about the work that we are doing on a really exciting project, which has turned into a series of projects that began last year called the Bellagio Project. And we will get to the details on that in just a moment. I'll start with a little bit of background on me, which informs the work that we are involved in. I, for many years, had probably the best job in Washington. I ran a team at the State Department that operated a lot like a venture fund. We reported directly to the Secretary of State. And our job was to find the best ideas we could for improving governance, democracy, and civil society around the world. And then we would bring together the tech, talent, resources, and partners required to build out those ideas and solve big challenges. And we had a lot of successes. We were very, very fortunate in a lot of the work that we did and worked in about 55 different countries all over the planet. But we also found that in many instances, the underlying infrastructure that we were dealing with was so broken that even when you had leaders that wanted to do the right thing, they couldn't get it done. It didn't matter how good their intentions were. And there are certainly a lot of places in which the leaders' intentions are not good. But even when people wanted to do the right thing, it wasn't happening. And this goes to a saying that I have kind of misappropriated from my friend Madeleine Albright, who says that we are living in a world where most nations are relying on institutions designed in the 19th century using technology from the 20th century to try and solve the problems of the 21st century. And the reality is the results are kind of predictable. It's pretty much what you would expect given that framework that we are operating in. If you look at the United States, our US Treasury Department, by their own numbers, this is not us making something up, these are the numbers that they put forward, makes $144 billion of improper payments every year. I'm going to say that number again, $144 billion of improper payments every year. And even by the standards of Washington, where I live, that is a lot of money, okay? That is a pretty extraordinary amount of money that's going out the door that should not be going out the door. 75% of Americans who try to get access to public services are denied on the first try. In most instances because they don't have the right paperwork. The documents that they need in order to demonstrate eligibility for those services are not in order. We have a lot of frustrated people who need help and who aren't getting help. And a lot of other instances in which the documents that you need to demonstrate eligibility for those services are being forged. So a whole series of different problems. Globally, we are looking at roughly a $3.6 trillion price tag on corruption. These are UN numbers. That is, again, just a staggering, astonishing amount of money. It is compounded by the fact that the tax gap worldwide, so the amount of money that should be coming in to coffers to solve problems in our societies, but is not coming in to government coffers, is about $3.1 trillion. So you put these numbers together, and again, in the old Washington saying a trillion here, a trillion there, pretty soon you're talking real money. The entirety of the SDGs, okay, the entirety of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which are the world's agenda for what we should be focused on for the next years leading up to 2030, are estimated to cost between $5 and $7 trillion annually to fund. So you fix this problem, you pretty much get everything else. If you solve these challenges, if you are able to address the underlying deficiencies, the rot at the core of the systems around the world, you're going to, at least in principle, have the resources available to do everything else we need to do to solve 169 of the biggest challenges that have been identified by the United Nations and leaders from around the world. So the bad news is everything is broken. The good news is if we could fix it, there's a really profound upside. There are some really amazing problems that could be solved if we were to address these underlying challenges. So all of that serves as the backdrop for a series of conversations that began a couple of years back. I was invited down to Richard Branson's island in the Caribbean. A pro tip, if you are ever invited to Richard Branson's island, go, because it's awesome. And while there, we started surveying the blockchain landscape. We had a number of leaders from around the ecosystem. And we recognized that there was an enormous amount of investment and excitement and momentum going into fintech applications for blockchain. There was far less happening at that point about 3 years ago in the governance and social impact space, despite the fact that many of the most compelling applications for the technology live in those sectors. And we wanted to solve that. We needed to do something about that. And so we created an organization called the Blockchain Trust Accelerator. It is based at a organization called New America. Our main office is in Washington, D.C., but we have satellites in New York, San Francisco, Chicago, Indianapolis, a bunch of other places around the country. We're a nonprofit civic incubator. Our job is to work at the intersection of policy and innovation and come up with big ideas. And the work of the accelerator is focused on developing and deploying blockchain solutions that solve big governance and social impact challenges. And what we've recognized as we do this is that you need organizations that can operate at the intersection of the private sector, where most of the expertise resides, the public sector, where a lot of the biggest problems are, but frankly a lot of the dysfunction is, and civil society, which has some know-how around how to fix these things. But you need organizations that can translate between all three of those communities, because left to their own devices, they don't do a very good job of talking to each other. And a lot of problems that could be solved if you pooled that expertise are just going to end up festering because there isn't a vehicle to get the solutions over the finish line. Since founding the Blockchain Trust Accelerator 3 years ago, we have been fortunate to work on some amazing projects with some amazing partners. So right now in Mexico, we're doing a project with Consensus, Harvard, the State Department, and Levi Strauss using blockchain to promote and support worker welfare. We did a project recently with the state of West Virginia where in the 2018 elections, if you were an overseas voter from West Virginia and you wanted to get your ballot back to West Virginia, you could vote using your mobile phone and blockchain technology, which is really cool. We're working with New York City right now on a data wallet solution for citizens, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And we've been involved in a number of different groundbreaking implementations around the world. So we've been fortunate to collaborate with amazing partners doing amazing things. One of those partners is the Rockefeller Foundation. And they are an incredible organization run by incredible people. And they came to us a year ago and they said, look, we have an idea. We have been responsible for the Green Revolution. We've been responsible for founding the field of public health. We created the field of impact investing. They've done a lot of big stuff at the Rockefeller Foundation. We think there's something here around blockchain and related technologies. We think there's something big, but we don't know what it is yet. We know that if done right, if we get it right, we could use these tools to solve a lot of different problems, but we're not quite sure how yet. And so they asked us to bring together at an amazing, amazing place that they have, and you guys are getting a totally warped perception of my travel itineraries in the course of this talk. They have this unbelievable, otherworldly estate in Bellagio on Lake Como that was given to them by a countess many, many years ago. And this is where they bring people to solve really, really tough problems. This is the place where the Green Revolution got its start. This is the place where the field of impact investing got its start, and a whole bunch of other big challenges that have been resolved that we all take for granted every day. And they said, we want you to bring the A-team together and start thinking about how we use these tools to solve the challenges that I spoke about for the last few minutes. And we said, that sounds intriguing. That sounds pretty fun. Let's do it. And so we pulled in an amazing, amazing community. We had heads of government. We had one of York's former colleagues, John Paul Farmer, who's now the Chief Technology Officer of New York City. We had Sheila Warren, who runs blockchain for the World Economic Forum. A lot of really, really incredible folks. Fuzz Hogan, the former head of news at CNN, and thought through for a couple of amazing days in an amazing place how these tools, how these technologies can help us solve problems. And more importantly, what needs to happen in order to unlock the potential that lives within blockchain? What needs to happen in order to unlock the potential that we know lies dormant, lies nascent in these tools, but isn't currently being harnessed? And we came up with a big agenda coming out of this meeting. And I want to talk about a couple of really exciting points where we've seen a lot of great activity. This was one of those meetings where it wasn't just everybody coming together and having a chat. We have had regular, almost monthly check-ins every month since, and we have done an incredible amount of work across a lot of different verticals in the last year. So, Vanessa, who is part of the BSIC team, was with us. She has participated in many of these discussions. You go to a lot of these things, and it's a whole lot of talk, a little bit of action. This one was some talk, yes, but then we've had a whole lot of action in the aftermath, which is what's exciting. And the three things that I want to chat about that we identified as critical needs that need to be addressed are first, the need for modular digital governance platforms. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. Second, the need for a blueprint for blockchain innovation to help organizations and governments that want to use these tools know where to start. And then finally, because we need to get faster at learning, we need to get quicker in our iteration, we need to create a global registry of what's happening so we can improve that reaction cycle and accelerate the process of deploying solutions that work. So those are the three things I want to spend a little time on, and I'm going to start with digital governance platforms. We are seeing around the world a bit of a revolution, and it is a revolution that is currently limited to a handful of countries, but in those countries, it's on. It's changing things in a big, big way. The first country and the place where I actually started learning about blockchain is Estonia. And years ago, back when I was at the State Department, I went and I sat down with the president of Estonia because they had succeeded in building, without question, the world's most sophisticated e-governance platform. And you go to Estonia as an American and you hang out in the president's office or the prime minister's office and you feel really pretty stupid and backwards because they are so far ahead of where we are that it just makes you a little bit sheepish to even show up and ask questions. But I asked a question, which was, look, if we wanted to replicate what you've done in other countries, how do we do that? What do we do? And he said at that point, well, if we were to start today, we would build on blockchain. And I said, huh? What? Because at that point, blockchain was the domain of money launderers and terrorists and pornographers and not something that you expected to hear about from one of the world's most advanced governments. And he said, they've got something here. They've got something really, really important. And what it turns out is that you can use blockchain as a foundation to create layers of digital governance that are highly resistant to corruption, that are really, really efficient, and make it a lot easier for people to gain access to the services and things that they need from their public authorities every day. And this is happening in different ways, sometimes using blockchain, sometimes not using blockchain. In places like Estonia, in places like India, with a new Aadhaar platform. And we've seen it work in some of the deployments of technology that we've been involved in places like West Virginia or the Republic of Georgia, where we did the world's first blockchain-based land registry. And we realized that if you could create open source governance solutions that were 80% solutions, you're never going to be able to solve all problems for all people in one platform. But if you can build out a really strong open source foundation that gets you 80% of the way there, and then hand things over to governments to solve and optimize the last 20% in a way that's going to meet their specific needs and be optimized for their specific circumstances, you could take this revolution that is transforming the way citizens interact with institutions in the handful of countries where it's happened, and you could scale it. And you could scale it pretty quickly, and you could scale it at pretty low cost. And so our friends at the Rockefeller Foundation liked this idea. They gave us some money to get things rolling, a couple $1 million, to begin the process of building and deploying beta platforms. And we're seeing this vision come to life really quickly. We're seeing it come to life in some regards more quickly than we had anticipated. We identified a number of different needs that were going to be critical in order to make this work. There were a couple of layers in this stack that were going to be necessary in order to get governments functioning. And these layers had to be modular. So some governments are going to want all of it. Some governments are only going to want a couple of pieces of it. You have to give them the option to choose what they want and what they don't want. And they need to be interoperable. So if you have a platform, it has to play nicely with the other platforms. Because what happens right now in the public sector is, to the extent they try to do technology at all, it ends up being way less than the sum of its parts rather than more than the sum of its parts, because none of the different platforms and solutions interact or play well with each other. But we realized that if you can do this, again, you're going to be able to solve a lot of problems. So New York City, the mayor's office, is working with us on a data wallet that will establish eligibility for city services. You remember the 75% of people who are trying to get access to things and are being turned down? Well, the single mom, Maria, who's over in the Bronx and right now has to take her kids out of school and find childcare and run around to 7 different offices to get the papers that she needs to apply for housing or shelter or nutrition, she's going to have a data wallet. And all of that information will be pushed there automatically. She's not going to have to run around anymore. And the fraud that currently exists in the system that costs the city and you as taxpayers a lot of money, that's hopefully going to go away too. We're going to see dramatic reductions in the waste and malfeasance that's present in these systems. We're working with some amazing partners in some amazing jurisdictions that I can't tell you about yet, but we will be able to soon, on building taxation and revenue management software. Right now, in a country like Singapore, once a year you get a notification from the government. And that notification says, we've done your taxes, here's how we calculated it. You can click here to accept your taxes, and you're done. Or you can click here if you want to dispute, but nobody disputes because it's all done right. And that's it. And you've paid your taxes, and you're good for the next year. And what that means is that compliance rates go way up. So you remember that tax gap that we were talking about, the $3.1 trillion that people owe that they're not paying, that isn't being used to improve healthcare, isn't being used to improve education, isn't being invested in infrastructure. You can solve a big chunk of that problem if you have good tax platforms. And we're seeing that opportunity open up, and it's opening up pretty rapidly. We're getting ready to do work on land registries and procurement and a whole host of other registries that are necessary for a functioning government stack. I mentioned the voting platform that we've already seen succeed. I think voting is step 1 in this, but you're also going to see really innovative and exciting mechanisms for civic engagement, like participatory budgeting. So you'll get a say in real time around how your resources are being deployed by your government. And that's going to shift the way that our institutions operate. It's going to make them better equipped to meet your needs and solve the problems that you're encountering. And the granddaddy of all of this is digital identity. Now, we are not building a digital identity solution. There are a lot of other amazing organizations that are working on digital identity solutions. I sit on the board of one of those enterprises called MOSIP, which is funded by the Gates Foundation, the Tata Trust, and the Omidyar Network, and they're building a modular open source identity platform. We're going to see those deployments start on a nationwide basis this year. So this is happening. It's not something that's off in the distance that we can look forward to when our grandchildren are graduating. This is happening in real time, which is really exciting. Next thing I want to talk about a little bit is the need for a blueprint. If we're going to have these tools, we need to know how to make them work. And more importantly, the individuals in organizations around the world that are trying to solve problems need to know how to make them work. And so this year at Davos, our team released, in partnership with the Tata Trusts, a landmark piece of research called the Blockchain Blueprint for Social Innovation that creates checklists and guides and case studies to help governance and social impact problem solvers around the planet know what they need to know to begin this process. It gets them ready to start deploying and building the types of solutions that are going to be able to solve a lot of problems. We also included something that should have existed a long time ago, and this is a concept that is now gaining currency, a dictionary of 100 really important terms that those of us who are in blockchain use all the time, but those of us who are not in blockchain think are gobbledygook. And so we need to decode those and make those a little bit more comprehensible. And we're seeing that happen as well. The last thing that I will mention is a blockchain impact ledger. We know that this is an iterative effort. We know that we're probably not going to get it exactly right the first time. And so in order to account for that, we need to accelerate the process of learning. We need to accelerate the feedback cycles that enable each of us in our organizations to incorporate new information, to identify what's working, and to make better decisions about how to deploy these technologies in the future. And so a few days ago, we released something called the Blockchain Impact Ledger, which is a partnership with the Social Alpha Foundation. And it creates the first curated repository of projects from all over the world that are using blockchain technology to solve governance and social impact challenges. The response to this has been fantastic, but we are just in the early days. This is like super beta. We need all of you who are working on amazing projects to put up your hands and say, hey, we've got something cool. We want to be a case study. We want to be part of this process of collective learning that has to happen if we're going to be successful in addressing these challenges going forward. These are solvable problems. The Blockchain Impact Ledger is organized according to the Sustainable Development Goals to make it really easy for people to kind of look through and see who's on their team, see who's solving the same problems. But these are solvable problems. We are seeing incredible creativity, incredible ingenuity all over the planet from people who are using these new tools to tackle the toughest challenges facing humankind. And if we can put in place a framework, if we can get the digital infrastructure that we all depend on in our societies and institutions right, if we can get the learning and the human capital right, because technology alone is necessary, but it's not sufficient. And if we can bring policymakers and decision makers up to speed so they know how to use these tools, and then if we can accelerate the process of collective learning that has to happen in order to address these challenges, we're going to be able to do some amazing things. A few years ago, the World Economic Forum crunched numbers from 35 years of United Nations data, World Bank data, OECD data. They talked to 15,000 CEOs and other corporate leaders, and they looked at what it takes to make societies successful. We talked at the beginning about how a lot of our institutions, a lot of our countries right now are broken. They distilled all of that analysis down to this sentence, which is that if you want to predict the prosperity of a country, if you want to know what's working in a country or whether a country is going to work, you just look at its institutions. We have an opportunity to renovate the institutions that we have all been relying on now for generations and that have not had renovation in a really long time. If we get that right, we're going to be able to do some incredible things. And just like the Green Revolution, just like the field of impact investing, just like the field of public health, I think someday we're going to be able to look back and say, we started something when we came together in Bellagio. And when we had Vanessa and a whole bunch of other good people put aside a few days of their time and think about what was going to be required to replenish the reservoir of trust that irrigates everything we do in our lives. And if we are successful in realizing this vision, it's something that we're going to look back on in a generation and probably take it for granted, and that's going to be fantastic. But we'll be the beneficiaries of a whole new generation of infrastructure, a whole new generation of solutions that will make it easier for all of us to address challenges that the world is counting on us to solve. Thank you.